Hello everyone, this is Loco S, and in today's video we're going to be going over basically a sort of a setup guide to your Huey, as well as a bit of a cockpit familiarization. So to set up the Huey, you want to make sure you go to Options here on the main menu, go to Special, come down here, and you have options to set show hints at mission start. I would just leave this disselected. I don't think this is functional in-game anymore. You might as well just leave it off because it'll just get in your way. You'll have autopilot availability, and this allows various forms of autopilot to take control in the mission, and this is generally helpful. And it is actually fairly realistic because the Huey is able to be piloted by both the co-pilot and main pilot. So having the autopilot be available is something that's just naturally was going to happen because you can easily just tell your other co-pilot or pilot to take the wheel and basically fly the aircraft while you man some of the systems. You also have a trimmer mode, so it's either default or other options, however you wish to set up your trimmer. Rudder trimmer, I would also recommend keeping this enabled if you don't have rudder pedals. There's also the ability to install a customized cockpit. And you also have cockpit camera shake, and this is how harshly the cockpit vibrates in certain situations. Obviously, for VR users, I would set this fairly low. I just set it slightly lower so that when I'm doing these tutorial missions and tutorial videos, it's not quite as bad for all of you, and you can more easily follow along with what's going on in the cockpit. Hitting OK will save those settings. Going over to controls, the UH-1 is what you want to look for. There is an option for a gunner. And you can use the, you can go in here to gunner and switch up things, but there's only really one thing to switch up or note, and that's to fire your door gunner weapon. You want to either use the space bar or you want to use your mouse button, basically your left mouse button. Going back to the actual aircraft, we're going to go scrolling down, because this is actually a relatively short list, believe it or not, of things that you want to make certain that you want to know what's set up and what's not set up. You also have your autopilot modes here. You can easily set up, so you just want to make note of your autopilot and how you want to set everything up. You can easily go in here, and I would just put an autopilot A and here, so that way you can just quickly enable autopilot, and then you can set up your different modes through using left control and like left alt, left shift, left A for altitude hold, level flight, so on and so forth. So attitude hold and then level flight, which is altitude hold. So those are some of the earlier controls that you just want to know, just to give yourself a little bit more leeway and take a load off you as the pilot as you're learning the aircraft. You also have down here, the first button I would bind is center view, and I have that bound to one of my buttons on my stick. That way I can center my view in the Huey, so I can look forward. Because I actually have on the Huey and pretty much all my helicopters that I fly, I have the basic hat switch without any extra keybinds set to basically slewing my view around. Whenever I get a VR headset in a couple of years, and because I'm trying to save up for one, obviously I won't need this, and I can use these for other things. But the hat switch for looking around is actually kind of vital in the Huey. The Huey has a really nice glass window in front, and you can actually get really good visibility out of it. So having the ability to look around in the Huey is actually really useful, especially when you're trying to find downed pilots and you're trying to find the landing zone you're looking for. Having the ability to slew your view all around is actually very useful. Going back up, let's see here, there we go. Going back down, eyeing the list. The next thing that pops up that's fairly important to know is the flare dispense button. The Huey only has flares for countermeasures. The Huey doesn't have chaff, so you want to make sure you have your flare dispense button enabled, so that if you get any IR missiles sent your way, you can easily just pop it off and deploy some flares to hopefully distract the man pads heading your way. Also, as flashlight, flashlight is left alt left control plus L as default. I also just put it as the L key just to keep things easy. You can also set up the flashlight color to change between green and white. I just normally leave it as is, so I don't usually play with that too often. But you can set up a green flashlight for different roleplay reasons. You can also setting up the flexible sight main lamp. This actually turns on some of the symbology on the main flexi sight when you bring it down. So you want to make sure you know that's bound to the O key for later on. And we'll go over that when we go over the sight. Going down. The next buttons that you want to know are the buttons to switch between the various positions. You might not have the option on certain servers to swap seats, but if you're playing a single player mission or a multiplayer server that allows you to swap seats, you can swap seats with using the 1 key to get you to the pilot seat. The 2 key will get you to the co-pilot / gunner seat, basically for the front-mounted miniguns. 3 and 4 are the door gunners, and if you want to basically set up how you want to control your co-pilot and door gunners, left shift plus 2 tells the co-pilot to switch between short and long bursts of the minigun, and 3 and 4 does that likewise to the door gunners. Control 2 tells your co-pilot or gunner to go to from weapons hold to return fire to weapons free, and same with the door gunners with left control and 3 and 4. Left alt 2 doesn't have any effect because left alt and 3 and 4 actually opens up the left door and the right door respectively, and it allows you basically to get the door gunners ready to go. You can also use it for quote-unquote role-playing and such whenever you're dropping off troops to open up the side doors as you're coming into land or when you're landed to basically get the doors open and allow the troops to exit, and then you could click those buttons again with left alt and 3 and 4 to close the doors up as you fly away. Now, if you want to know what you have your crew currently set to, left Windows plus H brings up the AI panel, and it'll show you what all their AI are currently set to. I also have this bound to the H key, so I can just quickly hit the H key and bring up what I have everyone set to. Also to note, sometimes on certain aircraft, like the Huey, you'll have the ability to show your controls, and I will be using it in the tutorial videos to showcase what my controls are to give you guys an idea of like what I'm currently doing with my controls to fly. Right control plus enter opens up and closes that view to clear out your view for flying around. Now the home key is going to be useful because whenever you're starting up your engine, you'll be wanting to press the home key after you get the engine set up to engage the actual engine. M key brings down a flexible sight, and the O key later that I previously mentioned turns on the symbology in that flexible sight. Trimmer reset is left control and T, and this basically resets the trimmer so you can move around your joystick more freely and then retrim it as needed. And in fact, nope. I'm going to add actually a keybind for that on my joystick because that's pretty useful. Do keep in mind sometimes your bindings will get wiped out and you'll have to go in here and reset your bindings. That's just a normal DCS thing That happens every once in a blue moon. And that is all of the keybinds you'll need for your joystick and also for your keyboard, just to know off the top of your head. The good news is that the wiper mode, this basically allows you to set your windshield wipers. So that's with the S and W key, and that's just a fun thing to do when it's actually raining in your mission. And as you can see, there's not a whole lot of keybinds here that you need to know and set up. That is the one good thing about the Huey, is that a lot of it can be done in the cockpit, and it's a lot of the stuff in the Huey is basically you set it and you kind of forget about it, and you just fly your mission and you focus on actually flying the Huey. So, let's get actually into the Huey and let's start going over the cockpit and seeing how it actually flies. And welcome to the cockpit of the UH-1 Huey. We're going to be doing a quick tour of the cockpit, showing you some of where all the panels are and where all the important stuff is, as well as go over the instruments. Starting off with the doors, by the way, will be open on the Huey. Right control and C opens and closes them, or you can actually find the handle and click on them to actually do the same thing. Also, just show you real quick, this is the crew status page I was mentioning before in the controls panel. Bringing that up gives you all some information about how everyone is set up. Let's go ahead and stick to the controls for right today. So here's your cyclic, which is what the control stick is called in the Huey, is your cyclic. Your rudder pedals are called your anti-torque pedals. Your throttle is actually on the collective here, and the collective is what you would consider a throttle in most of your jet aircraft, where this determines how much power the main motor gets. On the collective in the Huey, you have your ability to extend and turn on your landing lights, as well as to turn on and off a searchlight. Moving over to the center console, this is where a lot of the action takes place. You have your armament panel here. You have your countermeasure panel here. You have all of your navigation and communication radios all here in the center panel as well. And in front of that, you have a very important panel. This is your engine panel, where you turn on the fuel. Also, this is a very important panel because this is where the low RPM audio switches, and you want to keep an eye on that. Mainly because during startup, the low RPM audio will blare the very first thing once you turn on your battery. So to be able to come down here and turn it off to save your hearing is very useful. Plus, there's a couple of other instances where a low RPM will sound off, and just knowing where that button is so you can just get down there and turn it off it will be a lifesaver. Up here, you have your caution panel. You have an ability to reset your cautions. You have more control panel, and you have more stuff for your controls up here. You have your IFF panel up here in the corner. IFF isn't really modeled in DCS, so all you'll have to know is to just turn it on during startup. Also, we pretty much have wrapped up, actually that pretty much wraps up all the center console stuff. We now move up to here on the actual instrument panel. You have your fuel pressure and quantity. Don't be afraid if your fuel quantity isn't at basically max whenever you start up your Huey. A lot of mission creators will reduce the amount of fuel the Huey has on startup, so you're actually able to take off with some payload. You'll have your engine oil in terms of pressure here on the left gauge and temperature on the right gauge. Down below, you'll have your transmission oil temperature on the right and pressure on the left. Down below that, you have your main generator and standby generator instruments with your voltmeter on the right-hand side and your ammeter, which measures current and the load basically on the generators on the left-hand side. To the right of that, you actually have your radar altimeter, and during startup, you'll actually turn this on and set your high and low altitude warnings. That's right. This is a radar altimeter that gives you a high altitude warning. You can set that up there by rotating these knobs. Next up, you have some very important gauges for your Huey. You have your RPM rotor gauge up here. You'll want to keep the RPM in the green band or else bad things happen to the engine. You also have your torque in terms of pressure and your gas producer in terms of RPM. And again, you want to keep everything here below the red line in order to keep your engine healthy and yourself in the air. And you also have your exhaust temperature down here. I do believe with the reworked flight model, it is harder to overtemp your engine on hot days, like on the desert maps that we have in DCS. So I'll have to do some more experimentation on that myself. That update only just recently dropped, but you want to basically keep your exhaust temperature below 600 degrees Celsius, or basically in this green band right here. Moving up to the top here on the next column, we have our airspeed in knots, and we have down below here a slip gauge showcasing how far off to the left and right we are basically slipping off to the side. You have your attitude indicator up here, or ADI. Below that you have your HSI, as well as sort of also your radio compass. Set it to either a VORTAC or a ADF beacon. You can set a heading bug as well. And you actually have to calibrate the HSI, and you do it here with the compass synchronization knob. Down below here, this is, believe it or not, your ILS. I want to say ILS needles up here, indicating how far off you are from the ILS localizer beacon. And yes, you can actually have ILS in the Huey. It's useful if you need to get onto the actual airfield during basically a pitch black or basically entirely like zero visibility condition. Over here you have your marker beacon, and you can have a high sensitivity or a low sensitivity. And up above here, this is a light that comes on if you're flying over the beacon. This is a indicator that if your cargo release is armed. Above that, we have a clock that shows the local time. Off to the right of that, over here, we have a standby old-style compass. And as you can see, the compass here does not match in any way, shape, or form the actual heading that our standby compass is indicating. Up here is also a very important instrument. This is your vertical speed indicator, and basically this measures how fast or how slowly you are gaining altitude or losing altitude. When we get to actually talking about VRS, this is a very important gauge. If you descend too fast in the Huey, you will basically enter a state where the rotor blades of the Huey are falling through the air faster than they can actually generate lift from that falling air, because they kind of get sucked into a vacuum. And as such, you'll actually crash because your rotor blades will not be able to gain any lift. So this is a very important gauge to watch to make sure you basically don't fall out of the sky, especially if you're moving very slow. And above that is your barometric altitude. So you have your radar altimeter up here, and this is your barometric altimeter. And you can set the you can set the pressure for your barometric altimeter right here. So moving up here, before we go, by the way, you have your pilot fixed sight up here. Using right control and right shift and press 6 on the numpad, you can go ahead and move your head off to the side to turn on the switch to activate the pilot sight, and then hit this little plastic or metal tab here to bring down the actual sight, and that'll actually bring up your sight picture there. Plus, then you can use this knob here to adjust the angle and depression of that sight picture. We're going to stow that for today because we're not interested in that for quite a while. Moving up here, this is where all your electrics are going to be handled, as well as some quality of life features. You have your navigation and position lights, brightness and features located up here. Turn is either off or to bright, or to some various settings in between. You have your main generator switch up here. You have basically, this is where your DC voltmeter selector, so you can see where what you have what you're measuring your voltage on. You can I would just leave that on main generator. You can have your battery switch, your starter generator, your non-essential bus, and normal switch to determine which bus you want to have selected. Just keep that on normal. You have your inverter for either your spare inverter or your main inverter, and what phase you want that to be in. I would just leave that in AB. You have your bleed air and you have your bleed air here for pilot comfort and crew comfort, which doesn't really apply in DCS, but you have the bleed air switch there for that. You also have your wipers selection up here, as well as your cargo release up here. Moving backwards, you also have your external lights, which is here to determine if you want a steady, flashing, off for your external lights. Past that, you have your basically your dome lights to determine if you want to have lights on in the like basically sort of like floodlights in the cockpit. And you can have also your pilot lights on up here. And you actually turn on your radar altimeter up here. So this is your radar altimeter power switch back up here. And then down here is where you actually activate it by turning these switches. So it's very much two steps to actually getting your radar altimeter working. And also up here, if it's dark outside, or you can also use this to have all your instrument lightings set up for both the co-pilot up here, as well as the pilot, as well as your engine panel and everything else in between. And that covers it for your Huey and instrument panels. One little side instrument that is kind of useful, if a little bit fun, is there's actually also a temperature gauge up here. But it's not really useful. It's just something that's there for fun. You can always go to your briefing to get your air temperature. And now with that out of the way, I can say that covers it for all of the instruments here in the Huey. Next video, we'll go ahead and learn how to start up the Huey. I will do 2 series of videos to start out with for the startup. We're doing very much a scramble startup where we're getting the Huey started up as fast as possible, and then more of a quote-unquote proper startup where we go through more of the steps, we get more of the systems online. It's still not a quote-unquote by-the-book procedure startup, but it's a startup that by the end of it, you'll be all ready to go and set up for your mission. So with that out of the way, this is LockOS, signing out.